So I just want to start out by, what was that? Okay. So I just wanted to start out by doing a few introductions. My name is Susan Bryce. I coordinate the Lighthouse program here housed in the Student Health Center in the Office of Wellness and Health Promotion. And I have quite a few colleagues on the meeting that will be managing the chat. And I specifically want to thank Natalie Walton, who will be co-presenting with me this morning. She is our case manager here at the Student Health Center, as well as some of our Lighthouse program liaisons. Laura Jones, who is a nurse practitioner in the GYN clinic, and Miranda Brown, who is our mental health therapist, who is a liaison for the Lighthouse program. So I want to thank them for helping with this training as well as managing the chat. So just a little bit of housekeeping. The presentation today is being recorded. You will receive the recording sometime next week, as well as you will receive a zip file with our electronic Lighthouse Advocate Manual that contains a lot of information regarding sexual violence, different mental health resources, as well as all of the forms that we're going to reference today throughout the day. I also would like you all to have a pen and paper close by for an exercise that we're going to do in a few minutes. And then throughout the day, please feel free to utilize the chat for any questions, and we'll address them as they come up, or there also will be a time at the end of the training to just ask questions and discuss things that we've talked about throughout the day. So I do want to start out with a trigger warning because we are going to be talking about some topics that are sensitive. Today, you may hear some things that you may already be familiar with and other information that may be new to you. We're going to be talking about sexual violence, dating violence, harassment, and race and gender issues because we know that sexual violence impacts everyone directly or indirectly. We also recognize that many of us may have a reaction to some of the information we're sharing. So please know that you're not alone. There are resources that we'll post in the chat that you can access for support. Please feel free at any time to step away if you need to. And if you do need some support and resources, you can surely contact Sexual Trauma Awareness Response STAR at 1-855-435-STAR or RAIN, Rape, Aggression, Incest National Network for 24-hour emotional support at 800-656-HOPE. So I want to start out with having everyone reflect a little bit. And we're going to come back to this at the end of the day. But I want you to think about if a student came to you and says, I was raped last night. Think about what is your reaction? What are you feeling in the moment? You know, do you panic? Do you think, oh my gosh, I have no clue what to do? I need to call the police. I need to make a report. Just kind of what are those thoughts you have if a student came to you and disclosed? I hope that any unsure feelings that you may have will change throughout the day as we talk about responding to disclosure, recognizing signs that someone may be impacted, and becoming knowledgeable about the resources and support that we have here on campus as well as in the community. right, so moving into our training here, now that we've taken care of some housekeeping, what is the purpose of the Lighthouse program? Our program is designed to provide confidential, non-judgmental, and appropriate support services for all survivors of interpersonal violence. We do not discriminate against someone based upon gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, their age, or their decision to report the crime. In addition, the university does have a vested interest in obtaining an accurate account of the number of sexual assaults that occur on and off campus involving our students. A little background about the Lighthouse program. So the program initially was called the Sexual Assault Victims Advocacy Program. It was established here in 2003, and since then it has evolved greatly. We serve survivors of current and past trauma, and we serve students that have been impacted by interpersonal violence, and a majority of our students that seek out services are survivors of some form of sexual violence. Throughout today's presentation, you will hear me use the term survivor, and that is someone that has directly experienced the violence. Also, I always like to give a disclaimer when I'm giving presentations about sexual violence that I do tend to use the pronouns her and she, as 9 out of 10 victims of sexual violence are female. But I do want to recognize that males and students that may not identify as male or female are also impacted by sexual violence. In fact, those in the LGBTQ+ community are disproportionately impacted by sexual violence. So I want you to take that piece of paper and pen that I asked you to get out, and I'm going to have you guys write down a few things for me. So first, I want you to take your piece of paper and tear it into 4 strips and number those strips from 1 to 4. You will not be asked to share any of the information that I will have you write down. Certainly, if you're willing to share, please do so, unmute or type into the chat, but you're not required to share what I'm asking you to put on each strip of paper. So on that first strip of paper, I would like you to write down the name of someone that you trust the most. On the second piece of paper, please write down a place where you feel the safest. On that third piece of paper, please write your favorite activity, sport, or hobby. And then lastly, on your 4th sheet, I want you to write a secret, something you've told nobody or maybe only 1 or 2 others. And I will put those up there for you, those of you that may still be writing down your different components of this exercise. So to get started, Natalie's going to start us off with the exercise.
Hi, everybody. I want you to look at that first piece of paper that you've written down. What do you like about this person? Why do you feel close to this person? And so if anybody wants to unmute, you can certainly unmute, or you can type in the chat those answers if you were willing to share, if you feel comfortable with sharing. Okay. Now, tear up that piece of paper and throw the pieces away. You can no longer talk or be with that person. That person blames you for your assault or you were assaulted by them. How do you feel now? Now look at the second piece of paper. What do you like about this place? Why does it make you feel safe? And you can certainly share in the chat any of those answers. Again, tear up that piece of paper and throw the pieces away. You no longer feel comfortable going to that place. You're assaulted there. For example, sexual assault in a home or a sexual assault by partner. And usually those statistics are typically higher. How do you feel? Next, look at the third piece of paper with the place written on it. Think about it and think about what you like about this activity or sport or hobby. Now tear up that piece of paper. You can no longer take part in the activity, hobby, or sport. You might see your perpetrator there. What do you feel now? And I will let Susan take it away.
Okay, so finally, look at your fourth and final piece of paper with your secret. Think about, why is that a secret? Why don't you want many people to know about that secret? Unlike the first three things, with this piece of paper, you can't tear it up. You can't throw it away. You must keep it forever. Think about what people might say to you if they knew. Think about how they would react if you shared this. What might they do? Now think about telling a stranger, or maybe a family member, or a friend, or maybe even a student sharing with their instructor. How do you feel? What might you worry about to share this? What might you share? What might you worry about if you had to share this secret? Think about how a survivor might react after being assaulted. What if the person who assaulted them was their friend, or a partner, or a relative? What if it happened where they felt safe? What if they can take part in social activities? What if they cannot take part in social activities that they once used to? Think about some of the negative emotions you may have felt. What might be some of those consequences for someone? Social consequences, physical consequences, academic consequences. Can you see how important it is to respond sensitively if someone tells you their secret? This exercise is meant to put us in other people's shoes, reflecting on the significant changes that might happen in a person's life as they cope with the aftermath of being impacted by sexual violence and being victimized. It is also an exercise that makes you think about how important it is to respond in a serious and supportive way if someone in your life discloses a traumatic experience to you. Okay, so I hope that all kind of gets us in the mode to talk about responding to disclosure as we move throughout the training. You're hearing us use the term sexual violence, and I want you guys to understand that sexual violence is an umbrella term for all of these different behaviors listed under the umbrella. So it's a very general term that we will reference throughout the training. There will be materials in the manual that specifically talk about these behaviors in detail, but I don't want to spend time on that. I want to talk about our goals as advocates and really get into how to respond to students that may need support here on our campus. So first, let's look at the prevalence of sexual violence. At some point in their lifetime, women 1 in 3 experience some form of sexual or physical violence or stalking. For men, that number is 1 in 4. And for transgender individuals, that number is shockingly 1 in 2. When we specifically look at our LSU population, traditional age college women 18 to 24 are 4 times more likely to be sexually assaulted. About 60% of Black females have experienced sexual abuse by the age of 18. We see significant disparities among people of color in our LGBTQ+ community. Native Americans and American Indians are twice as likely to experience sexual assault. When we look at members of the LGBTQ+ community, they're also at higher risk for sexual assault. 44% of lesbians and 61% of bisexual women experience rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, whereas that percentage for heterosexual women is 35%. 40% of gay men and 47% of bisexual men have experienced sexual violence or rape. And that number in comparison to heterosexual men is 21%. When we talk about perpetrators of sexual violence, 8 out of 10 sexual assaults are committed by someone that the victim knows. Breaking it down, about 39% of those victimizing someone are an acquaintance of the survivor, and 33% are a current or former partner or spouse. Only 20% of college women report to law enforcement, and this is the most underreported crime. When we open our lens to looking at the general population, when it comes to reporting to law enforcement, that number is about 30% of women reporting to law enforcement. And we can also address that there is a barrier for men going to seek support and certainly report when it comes to being victimized by sexual violence. So that number is much lower for men. Looking a little bit closer, kind of focusing the lens on our campus and looking at the college environment, more than 50% of sexual assaults occur from August to November. This in research has been coined the red zone. The fall semester is a time where we see a lot of new students coming to a new environment. And so there's many factors that may increase their risk when it comes to sexual assault. Some of those factors may include that new environment, lower inhibitions, a little bit or more independence, no longer living at home with guardians and parents. We also at LSU have a football program. There is a high consumption of alcohol, and our tailgating culture that also increased risk for sexual assault. College men are 5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than males who are not enrolled in a higher education setting. As great as 73% of LGBTQ plus students experience sexual harassment or abuse while at college, causing them many times to leave the institution and transfer, or having to transfer out of classes or drop courses. Stalking is another behavior that we've been seeing a slow increase among our campus as well as nationally. And a lot of that plays a role into the fact of social media and our connectedness to one another through smartphone and other devices. So 5.8% of college students have experienced stalking while they have been enrolled in higher education. So specifically, let's talk about LSU and our commitments. LSU is committed to ending sexual violence. We want to create a safe environment focused on preventing sexual violence and providing support to survivors that have been impacted. You will see this resource wheel throughout campus. This is a wheel that we reference a lot in our work, whereas students can look at their options for resources and get connected. In the center here, we have the Lighthouse program, and we like to refer students to the Lighthouse program because it is a confidential program. So looking at our Lighthouse program, its utilization and its trends, you can see here that we have seen an increase in students coming to the Lighthouse program for support and resources. In 2016, we had 53 students access our program and get resources and support. As you can see, there was a dramatic increase in 2017. And a lot of that we contribute to the movement of Me Too. That movement has really impacted our society, not only at LSU in the United States, but across the world. Students have become more aware of the program, but also feel more empowered to seek out support and resources. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of our program trends over the last couple of years. We do have more students seeking support and resources, as indicated by the graph over here. But also we've seen an impact, of course, due to COVID-19. We did see a lot less reports coming in during the beginning of the pandemic, but we have seen an increase in dating and domestic violence reports to the Lighthouse program. And a lot of that can be associated with many of our students were isolated and living in an environment with their abuser. So also really making it a challenge to reach those students and provide them the support and resources they need. We also contribute some of the decrease in reports and students seeking services through Lighthouse because we didn't have in-person classes. We were all going remote by March. And sometimes students don't actively seek out support. Instructors aren't physically seeing the students coming into their class and maybe seeing some of those red flags that a student may be at risk. So we also attribute some of those numbers going down in 2020 just because of the pandemic. Doesn't mean that those things are not happening, I think it really speaks to many people not seeking out support during that time. When we look at the perpetrators of sexual violence, we have about, so looking at our 2020 data, we had 38 perpetrators that were LSU students or part of the LSU community, and 31 students that were non-students, and then another 19 that were unknown. And those unknown were the survivor did not know the status of the individual that victimized them, or it may have been that they didn't share that information when they sought out our program. One thing that we have seen is an increase in institutional reporting. So in 2020, we had 13 students go through either the Code of Student Conduct process or our Title IX process, which will be discussed in detail in our session with Jeff Scott and Jonathan Sanders in a little bit. So I think that is a positive, seeing more students feeling comfortable coming forward and going through the reporting process. As I talked about in the statistics, we do see a disparity among students of color, LGBTQ+ students, as well as males seeking out resources and support. And so last year in 2020, we saw 2 males access the Lighthouse program, and we had no students that identified as transgender seeking our program. So one of our goals as a program is to really connect with those communities that are in need of services and support. We all have an obligation to investigate and provide resources and support to those that have been impacted by sexual violence. It is LSU's obligation, not only from federal law, local Louisiana law, as well as university legislation, guidelines, and policy. It's not just policy and guidelines that make us obligated to respond to sexual violence, but we also have a moral obligation. Failure to act and investigate and provide resources and support can ultimately turn into a loss of federal funding. Specifically speaking to Title IX, I won't get too much into detail with that because we have a whole session on that. But Title IX is aimed to end all sexual discrimination in all areas of education. It is not just about equity among athletics, but also includes sexual violence. And this is enforced by the Office of Civil Rights under the Department of Education. We also have the Clery Act, which requires campuses to disclose information about crime on or near campus and publish an annual report. At LSU, our LSU PD publishes that annual report. The crimes that must be reported include murder, manslaughter, sexual assault, rape, fondling, incest, statutory rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, motor vehicle theft, and arson. Part of the Clery Act requires LSU to have a timely warning, an emergency response, and notification communication. So that is when we receive text messages through the EOC in regards to maybe a situation that LSU PD is investigating somewhere on campus. We also have a lot of different guidelines, maybe not policy or legislation, but we have guidelines that help us form our practice and response to sexual violence. And our White House task force reports that were issued in 2014 and 2017 have guided us in regards to providing different support services, prevention education to our students and staff, making us accountable for investigating and looking at adjudicating reports of sexual violence on college campuses. What really brought to light the issue of sexual violence on college campuses was the Dear Colleague letters in 2011 and 2014. Under this investigation, it indicated that there was an epidemic of sexual violence occurring on college campuses, and it called for us to respond, to develop procedural requirements for responding, and develop consequences for not complying to those requirements. Here at LSU, our local policy is called Permanent Memorandum 73, and that will be discussed in our policy section of the training, but I did want to make sure to mention that. So Lighthouse program, I gave you guys some numbers about how many students have sought out our programming resources. You might wonder, how does a student get connected to the Lighthouse program? There's so many different ways that a student gets connected to our program. Of course, they may self-refer themselves. They may request Lighthouse services as they may be a patient in the medical clinic or seeing one of our clinicians in mental health, and they send a referral to the Lighthouse program. The Title IX campus coordinator also refers reports and students to the Lighthouse program, as well as student advocacy and accountability. We also we have a partnership with LSU PD. They share information with the Lighthouse program that for students that may be interested in Lighthouse services. And then of course, another way that we serve students in the Lighthouse program is through you guys, Lighthouse advocates, students coming to a Lighthouse advocate seeking the support and resources. We also receive LSU care reports. And one way that many people may refer a student to the Lighthouse program, or a student may self-refer themselves, is through our Lighthouse online request form. And I'll have that posted in the chat here, but this is a form that someone can go fill out, and our program receives that request and we reach out to the student. We've also seen an increase in peers referring to our program. So last spring, we saw a large amount of students seeking out our program, and the reason that they knew about our program is because their friend also utilized the program. So we're really excited that students are sharing that information with their peers to really continue to promote the program. As much promotion and advertising we do through our programming, through our orientation process when students initially get to LSU, we still find a lot of students are not aware of the Lighthouse program. So this is Lighthouse Advocate training. So what is the role of a Lighthouse Advocate? So your role is to support, guide, educate, and refer that student. The period after a traumatic event can be confusing. Lighthouse advocates ensure no survivor or student at risk navigates the medical, legal, mental health, or university system alone. As an advocate, you are not expected to be an expert. You are simply a support. These are the main goals of a Lighthouse advocate. You need to provide a safe place for a survivor to disclose and express their feelings. Support the survivor and help meet their needs. help stabilize their reactions to the trauma, and help them prioritize and plan to resolve their concerns. Many times when a student comes to you for support, they may be in crisis. They may not be able to think about planning and prioritizing what needs to get done. They may be overwhelmed. So helping them make a plan and then providing them information and referrals. As you have a student that may come to you for Lighthouse support, you want to explain to that survivor that they make the decisions about the support and resources offered. We really want to empower that student. A student becomes empowered by having their choices to regain that sense of control and normalcy. So Lighthouse advocates have a unique component where you do have confidentiality. Now, as many of you serve in your roles as maybe academic advisors, deans of colleges, administrators, you are a mandated reporter. When you're serving in your role as a Lighthouse advocate, you are not a mandated reporter. So I'm going to go into this because this is always a portion of the training that we get a lot of questions. So I'm going to go through this slide and talk about confidentiality, and then we can go back and answer questions about that later on today. So when a student comes to you, they may not immediately say, "Hi, I'm here, you're a Lighthouse advocate. I'm going to tell you something that is probably shocking, alarming." They don't give that context when they start out. They just start sharing what has happened to them. So if a student is about to disclose or has disclosed, gently pause that student when it's appropriate and confirm that they would like to approach you in your advocate role. As you speak with the student, of course, mention that there are limitations. If a student expresses suicide ideation or homicidal ideation, we do have a requirement to act on that. So in order for a student to understand your limits in confidentiality and understand your role as a Lighthouse advocate, we have a survivor to consent form, and if we place that, should be in the chat, and also you should have received an email from me yesterday afternoon with that as an attachment on the email. So this is a form that you can, you want to talk with a student through. Let them understand that as a Lighthouse advocate, you will provide support and information to the student. And this consent to contact covers exactly what I'm talking about, that we have an obligation to share information if someone is in potentially harmful to themselves or others. But also, we want to make sure that they understand that you're going to keep information confidential unless they ask you to share information with others. So it's always good to have a conversation and say, is it okay to share this information on a need-to-know basis? Walking that student through maybe if they do need academic support, who may need to be contacted and may need to know a little bit more information. Of course, a student may not want to share details, and really, as an advocate, we need to do our due diligence in limiting the amount of details that are shared to get students resources and support that they may need. So looking at this form, this is an agreement between you and that student. So the Lighthouse program or advocate may contact them at the number or email listed below to follow up about the case. Again, have that conversation with the student. How do they prefer to be contacted? Is it safe to call them? And that is where we do have a space here on the form for students to write any requests. I've worked with many students that only prefer to be emailed, whereas others, you can only contact them through phone calls. So making sure you have that communication and discussion. Also reviewing with them that you're gonna respect their privacy by leaving only their name and number when you contact them, not sharing details about the case. Also, reminding them that it is confidential and that you are sharing select information with the university if needed. And then again, lastly, the fourth thing listed on the form is exceptions or limitations to confidentiality. So this is a good form to think about and incorporate into your conversation if a student does come to you as a Lighthouse applicant. As an advocate, you do not need to report to law enforcement or to LSU. Let me say that again. If a student comes to you in your role as a Lighthouse advocate, you do not have to call police and you do not have to submit a report to LSU. So you don't have to go to the Title IX website and submit a report, or you don't need to go to LSU Cares and submit a report. On the next slide here, we're going to talk about what does need to be reported to me in the Lighthouse program. Going back to what I talked about, some of our legislation and policy that requires us to share information with the public about crimes occurring on and around this campus. We still have to report numbers. So your role as an advocate will be completing an anonymous report form. And that form is in the chat, and we'll kind of just walk through it a little bit here. So this information is, fill it out to the best of your ability. Looking at the top of the form here, so this form should be used by a Lighthouse advocate responding to a victim or survivor of sexual assault or relationship violence. The information collected on this form is used only for reporting purposes. This is an anonymous report. There shouldn't be any student identifying information on this form. And that information that you collect on this form is sent to me, and I compile our annual numbers from the Lighthouse program and share those with LSU PD to contribute to the Cleary report every year. Now, when a student comes to you, you don't necessarily want to get out this form and have your eyes glued to it. Really, we need to be active listening to the student when they come to us, but maybe having this form available, and even, telling the student what you will be doing, that you do have to do an anonymous report, that information, there will be no identifying information recorded on the sheet, but you do have to share some information in regards to what they're sharing with you. So when this form is completed, you must send it to the Lighthouse program, and you can do that through a encrypted email or through campus mail. And that contact information is at the bottom of the form here. So this form has a lot of different areas to fill in. I do want to emphasize we don't need to pry to ask a ton of questions to get all the details. You fill this form out to the best of your ability. I have a range of students that will come in and tell me every detail versus someone that hardly shares what has happened to them. So filling this form out to the best of your ability. At the bottom, you'll see that there is a place for you as an advocate to complete your information. We do want to know who's sending us the report, which advocate. This also helps us, look at where maybe students are seeking out advocates more. It helps us determine where we target recruiting our Lighthouse advocates every year. So this is a form that will be completed and sent over to me through email or through campus mail. I did want to mention too, so the consent to contact form that we talked about, that is an agreement between you and the student as an advocate. This consent to contact form does not need to be sent over to me. Of course, one of your jobs and goals of an advocate is to refer. So you can certainly refer that student over to me or someone else over in wellness and health promotion to assist with providing support and referrals to resources. But this is a form for you and the student. If the student is referred over to meet with me, we'll complete another consent to contact form. Okay, so that's the administrative part. When we talk about what you have to do if a student comes to you and discloses, submit that anonymous report, make sure you go through the consent to contact with them so they understand what confidentiality means and what your role is. So I've talked about Lighthouse program. We provide resources and support. Well, what exactly are those? So I'm going to take this time to go through and talk to you about the different resources and support that we provide through the Lighthouse program. And Laura, feel free to chime in here. You are our medical expert here. So one of the things that we offer in the Lighthouse program is assistance with obtaining medical care. So that can mean STI screening, a physical exam and minor wound care, prophylaxis treatment, which may include prophylaxis antibiotics for different STIs, as well as prophylaxis treatment called PrEP for post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. And we also help students with obtaining medication that they may need. If a student does seek out medical care at the Student Health Center in the medical clinic, we cover the cost of that. Some of those things that we cover the cost for are, of course, the STI screening, but also getting a student, they may need Plan B, or the first aid care for minor injuries. We do cover the cost for that, and we help students obtain prescriptions that they may need for treatment when it comes to their assaults. Our Student Health Center medical staff, Laura Jones and her partner in crime, Lauren, who is busy doing COVID vaccines this week, they coordinate the medical care and the medical follow-up. So they have that communication with students to make sure that they receive all of the appropriate treatment and retesting at appropriate times. We also are very fortunate to partner with the East Baton Rouge Coroner's Office for evidence collection services and having sexual assault nurse examiners, SANE nurses, dispatched to the Student Health Center to collect evidence, or commonly called a rape kit. So this is a time-sensitive resource. Students and, well, anyone can get a rape kit or evidence collection up to 120 hours post-assault. Obviously, sooner the better. A lot of times we have students come in, they want the STI screening, they don't know if they want evidence collection. We really encourage students, if they're unsure about evidence collection and reporting, we encourage them to get that evidence collected, and then they can later make the decision if they want to make a report to law enforcement. When evidence is collected, those kits are kept for at least a year post collection. We also recognize that students may be more comfortable accessing medical care outside of the student health center. So we also help students that choose to seek medical care off campus. And also we recognize that the student health center has Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 hours, and medical clinic hours Saturday morning. So a student may need to access services, evidence collection outside of those hours. So, you know, helping students know what their resources are in our community, you know, sending them to Baton Rouge Clinic, the Baton Rouge General ER, Women's Hospital. We help students with that as well. Another thing that we assist students with is understanding their rights to report. So students do not have to report. That is that's something that we continue to emphasize with students, because we know that a lot of times is a barrier to getting support and resources. They may think that they have to report to LSU, or they may have to report to law enforcement. So we help students understand their right to report, and then assist them if they make the decision to report. So helping them understand our university reporting process, helping them through that process many times as an advocate, attending some of those meetings maybe, and helping them remember what they need to go to these accountability meetings and investigation meetings. And then also facilitating contact between police if they choose to report to law enforcement. So we are very grateful that we have a great working relationship with LSU PD, you know, working closely with their investigators to have them, you know, they'll come to the student health center, come to my office, and take a student's report there in an environment that they may be more comfortable in. We also assist with housing relocation. So if a student is living on campus, we can work closely with Residential Life in looking at options for them to relocate to a different side of campus. We also can work with Res Life to get a student emergency housing. So maybe that student lives off campus, feels unsafe. So you know, we have space with Residential Life that we can have a student stay in. We also help students in regards to getting emergency housing and shelter in the community. You know, helping with the intake process to get in residence housing with Iris Domestic Violence Center. They recently added more rooms to their housing. So those that may need maybe longer term housing off campus, or maybe they have children That is a resource that we help students get connected to. And we also work with the Butterfly Society, who can assist with some of the financial obligations if someone needs to, stay at a hotel for a night, closely working with them to help that student have some housing and feel safe. We also assist with academic accommodations. So working closely with the Office of Disability Services, we have the opportunity to get a student those accommodations that they need to be successful. So examples of accommodations may be consideration for absence, some distracted, reduced environment, extended time for completion of work, note takers, different resources and accommodations that we can put in place so that student can continue to be academically successful. Another large part of the advocacy work we do in this program is initiating sometimes communication with students' instructors. It can be very intimidating for a student to call their professor, email their professor and say, hey, I'm in an unhealthy relationship and this is why I didn't make it to my test today. So a lot of times we advocate for students, help them, share the information needed with their instructors and really, help them make sure that they are able to continue with their academics, or maybe even having some of those discussions where we may need to talk about options for withdrawing from courses, maybe resigning from the semester. We help them navigate those processes and work really closely with student advocacy and accountability. We also provide mental health support, assist students with referrals to both our mental health service here within the Student Health Center and off-campus resources. It's well known that mental health service is a highly utilized service on our campus. Lighthouse referrals do receive priority scheduling. So when a referral is sent from the Lighthouse program, students typically have an initial consultation within 2 weeks when a referral is sent. So getting students in for initial consult is a priority among our program, but also, again, recognizing that sometimes students may not want to utilize the resources here on campus. So working closely with Natalie to find community resources. We partner a lot with STAR and they're doing our afternoon portion of this training that is always really liked by advocates, but they offer a lot of similar resources and support that the Lighthouse program does, but they offer their services to the entire Baton Rouge area community. So, sometimes students would rather seek out some of those counseling services at STAR or, different entities in the community. We also assist with other referrals. So this certainly is not a complete list, but commonly, students may be food insecure. In some situations, students may be in a relationship that they want to end. They don't have the financial capability to leave the relationship, and and have access to food. So letting them know about the LSU food pantry, providing referrals to legal advocacy and support, specifically IRIS Domestic Violence Center, serving those that have been impacted by domestic and dating violence. And STAR also has a legal advocacy department that offers free services. And many times those legal advocacy resources help with obtaining temporary restraining orders and permanent restraining orders. Also serving as an advocate through the judicial system, going to court with them when they have to appear in front of the judge, helping them understand that very complicated process. Another thing that we may assist students with is getting connected to SNAP benefits, helping them understand resources for financial support. So many times referring them to the Student Emergency Fund that we have here in Student Affairs, helping them write their requests for financial support. As well as Natalie many times will help students get connected to insurance options. So like I said, this isn't a complete list of different referrals, but certainly these are some of the ones that we commonly will help students get connected with. So the Lighthouse program is a program housed in the Student Health Center, and we operate Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. And so there's many hours outside of that students may need resources and support. So here are some of the resources that I've mentioned that we share with students. And all of these resources are on our website. I encourage you all, if you have not yet, check out our website. We have a lot of great information. A lot of times I tell students when they come, we talk about a lot of things. It can be overwhelming. I always refer them, check out the website. Everything we talked about is on there and is explained for you. So, but these are really important resources that students can also access. All right, so I am going to start a poll here. So can you tell me true or false? If a student tells you they were sexually assaulted, you must call the police. Is that true or false? Seeing lots of falses. Is my poll not working? I thought I can relaunch it, but well, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I see everyone's putting in chat. Great, false. Not seeing a true here. Good. So this is false. As someone that deals with survivors and supports them every day, you hear some things that immediately you want to react and say, oh my gosh, call the police, report this. We have to take a step back and remember that the survivor needs to make those decisions. So no, we don't need to call the police. And even if someone comes to you and you're not in your lighthouse role, you still do not call the police. That can be very overwhelming for a survivor. And so I do want to re-emphasize that. It's probably not the first time you're going to hear me say it, but You know, that commonly is something that we hear in our work, that, you know, someone shared with their instructor that they were assaulted and they call the police. That's, you know, everyone has good intentions, but that's not what we need to do. You know, if you're not in your Lighthouse Advocate role, you need to submit that mandated report. If you're in your Lighthouse Advocate role, you know, supporting that student and talking them through their options, and you know, submitting that anonymous report. Let's see, how are we on time? Okay. Okay, so walk through a lot of information, and that's kind of, you know, we're talking about that initial time that a student comes to you as an advocate. There, of course, is follow-up to this, and again, just like this entire process of a student disclosing, they guide the process. But certainly in that initial conversation, talk about follow-up. Does that student want follow-up? Do they want to meet in person? Do they want to meet virtual? They prefer a phone call, just an email check-in. Some of the things to consider when checking in with a student is just seeing how they're doing, reaffirming that they are safe. You know, good question to ask is, are they attending class? Are they able to attend their job? Go through and review the referrals. You know, a lot of times in initial meeting with a student, they don't think they need all of the different support services you're talking about. But circling back to them on that follow-up and saying, hey, we talked about this. Do you think now this would be something helpful for you? And really making sure that that student knows your offer does not expire. I have had students that came in, met with me once, didn't hear a thing for them for 2 or 3 semesters, and then they come back and say, okay, I really need some of those academic accommodations, or I think I'm ready to report to LSU and go through the Title IX process. So again, just continuing to follow up on those referrals, review the support and resources. So again, a student is in a situation where they may be in crisis and they are not, they can't remember all these things. Their brain is trying to process all of these different things that have happened to them. They're worried. They don't want other people to find out. They don't want to go to class. They're feeling anxious. They're feeling depressed. So just reviewing those things with them is always a good plan. And then counseling is always a good follow-up suggestion. So again, we're not forcing or making any decisions for the student, but just offering that as a resource for them. And as I said at the beginning of this slide, you know, schedule for further follow-up as needed. That really varies for each student individually. So, you know, some students may prefer to have some consistent follow-up, whereas others will kind of say, I'll reach out to you if I need additional support. So that is a lot of information. And as I said, you do not have to be the experts. You, a lot of times, are that first person that they're sharing their story with. And if you have questions, concern, you need additional support, do not hesitate to contact me. This is my direct phone line. And then also, you know, we have our staff is also trained advocates and can assist with this as well. So Also calling our main office. We can also get connected with you. But, you know, as I talked about those resources and support, those referrals we make to the medical clinic, getting students those academic accommodations, you know, your role may be initiating some of those referrals, or it may just be, here's your options, and now I'm going to refer you to Susan, and she's going to get you scheduled for that STI screening. Before we take, let's see, I think we're on a break next. Before we take a break, I did just want to share a little bit in regards to timeline for getting a student in to see us at the Lighthouse program. We typically see students within 3 days of them reaching out to us or you sending us a referral. We will certainly 100% do same-day appointments. It's the nature of my job that sometimes a student is in our main office and says, I need Lighthouse support. So we will accommodate that student. That being said, we're in a pandemic. We also will gladly meet with a student based upon their needs. So if a student prefers to meet in person, we will certainly do that. Also, if a student discloses to you and maybe you think that they are ready to, you know, get that medical care, to really, you know, they seem ready for resources, you can certainly walk them right over to the Office of Wellness and Health Promotion to meet with us. We always have a staff member that can make themselves available if I'm, you know, busy in a meeting or out of the office, but certainly, you know, feel free to walk a student over or give me a call. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you all have my contact information and know that I'm a resource for you. The purpose in having advocates all throughout campus is that we find some students don't feel comfortable seeking out services at the health center, or maybe they better identify with someone in their college, or maybe they're a student worker in the College of Agriculture. So maybe they want to utilize an advocate in one of those areas because they just feel more comfortable. So they may not want to meet with me, but I'm happy to consult on like next steps, what you should do. So please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns. So we are going to head into a break here, and we will be back at 10:45 where Natalie's gonna take over, and we're gonna really talk about what do we do when a student discloses. So we will be back in about 15 minutes.
A judgmental or overreactive initial response, disbelief, minimizing, or questioning the truth of a survivor's story or reactions, asking for unnecessary details, something that may not be related to the case or related to you gaining this information, or focusing on the behavior, appearance, and or location of the incidents. That's usually, if that's the situation, if they choose to go through a report with the police, that might be something for the police to do, but not really focusing on that because that may not be your role. Focusing on your own emotional reaction, horror, sadness, anger, recalling a similar experience you may have had. You're there for the survivor, so staying very focused on the survivor and what you can do to support them, making it about them. And also questioning why our survivor did not act in a manner that society expects. Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you report to the police? Just continue. Why didn't you stop contacting the perpetrator? Because sometimes they may still have that continued contact with them, maybe because they're still a partner. So that's what it is for them. And questioning that could be more harmful than helpful. It does take a lot to come forward to seek support and resources. So it is important that you are aware of the way the survivor might perceive your own body language, questions, and comments. And these are challenges that if you're aware of them, that can prevent a survivor from not seeking the support that you may need or that they may need. Especially sometimes with survivors, they may seem calm or they may not choose to report to police, but that's their decision. So being aware of that can help you avoid those mistakes. So what do I do if a student discloses? Don't panic, and then listen and believe them. That is something to always know, is because they may feel that no one around them believes them and that you're that presence and you're that trusted person to them. So listen to their story and believe them, because you are a trusted person and they want to feel safe with you, and creating that safe environment can help support them and be a corrective experience for them. So what to do? Explain the Lighthouse program, explain what's going on, the services that we have, the support services, and that everything is free and confidential, because as Lighthouse advocates, we are offering that free and confidential services. Explaining your role. Non-judgmental supporting guidance. So being there and letting them know that this is a safe space, letting them know that you're not there to judge, you're just there to support and guide them through the process. Offering limitations. So telling people telling your individuals what those limitations are and what you can and cannot do. And if it's something you can't do, let them know where you could receive these resources. Also, refer to your checklist. That checklist that we have that is given to y'all that were dropped in the chat. That is a good document that you can say, like, okay, I explained my role. I explained the Lighthouse program. I explained confidentiality and its limitations, assessing the survivor's safety. So knowing, like, okay, are you safe? Can you keep yourself safe? And also that's also limits to confidentiality, especially if there is some kind of mental health risk, some kind of threat for homicide or suicide, especially some suicidal ideation. You want to assess that to make sure everything is okay. And if emergency resources are needed, call LSU PD, local police, or 911. Support immediate needs. Do they need medical and evidence collection? Do they need to relocate to another location, especially if they're living on campus? Do they need that support to relocate with res life? Or do they need to move on to campus to know that they can be safe? Completing consent to contact form with the survivor. Listening to the survivor and offering that non-judgmental, empathetic, or empathic support. In the consent to contact form, as Susan mentioned earlier, it is an agreement between you and the student. And then also letting them know what they are, giving them that menu of options that they have that are available to them. If they want to report to Title IX, they can. If they want to go through the process of reporting to LSU PD. If they want to contact, the LSU mental health, they can. If they want to contact the LSU medical clinic to receive some kind of support for medical examination, testing, STI prophylaxis, evidence collection to get a rape kit done, to contact SANE. If they want to be referred to STAR, Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response, which is a good community resource that we have, as well as IRIS, the Domestic Violence Center, for counseling, safety planning, off-campus housing resources, legal advocacy support, referring to the LSU Office of Disability Services for academic accommodations, which can include class changes, consideration for absences, extended time to complete assignments, referring to, the following to the Lighthouse program for follow-up care and additional support, and also to me for referral to the case manager for additional support like food stamps, SNAP benefits, insurance support, or specialty trauma survivors. Specialty work with trauma survivors in the community for therapy. You can schedule follow-up calls and complete the anonymous report to make sure that we have as much information as possible so we can let Lighthouse know about that. And then that's part of the process. So that's what to do in the beginning. And also listen to the survivor story. Listen to what they have to say, and then collect that basic information, kind of avoiding those common mistakes of not have to ask all those extraneous information that aren't necessary to what we need to know. The type of incident, was it a sexual assault? Was it stalking? Was it harassment? Was it interpersonal violence? Was it domestic violence? The date and the location. What was the relationship between the survivor and the perpetrator? Is the perpetrator a student? Offer support and resources, completing the anonymous report, and then sending the anonymous report to the Lighthouse program. You can send it in an encrypted email to Susan. We have the email address listed above, or in campus mail in a sealed envelope marked confidential to the Office of Wellness and Health Promotion. And if they are exploring the option to do evidence collection, remind them they have that time to choose and when they want to, but letting them know that that information is time sensitive, that they have up to 120 hours post assault. And then follow up. You can offer a follow up to the student and letting them know it's not always wanted, and that's okay. But sometimes they just want to hear their options and they may choose to accept those resources and referrals at a different time, or letting them know these options are always available to you when you want them or when you need them. Okay, so we're going to do a case review. So you receive an email from your student employee who shares that she was raped 2 days ago at a party and she cannot make it into work today. She states that she is scared, that she is pregnant, and she may have contracted a sexually transmitted infection, STI. She hasn't told anyone. Although she is close to her mother, she is afraid that her mother will not believe her and will be angry because she was drinking. She does not want to make a report to law enforcement. In the email, she acknowledges your role as a Lighthouse advocate and requests to meet. So what do we do in this situation? We can refer to our checklist, although walk through the steps of your advocate role and let them know what you are there for and what you're able to do. Explaining confidentiality, that it is not required to report to PD, police department. You also still want to assess for any kind of presence of suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation and make sure that their safety is still present, that they can keep themselves safe. Check to see if they are safe from any kind of other immediate threats. Thank them for sharing, telling them that you believe them, that you're not alone. Alcohol does not equal consent. The student won't get in trouble for underage drinking because of the LSU amnesty policy. Validate feelings of being scared. Okay, not to tell their mom or others. So describe how you will approach the meeting. And you can drop in the chat, you can come off mute. How would you approach the meeting from the beginning? Maybe some demeanor. How would you like to approach that? And you can certainly drop in the chat if you would like. Okay, so all those were ways, but always using the Lighthouse checklist as a support resource for you because it helps you guide through the process. How can you approach the meeting? But first off, just thank them. Thank them for telling you and kind of going back to that guide that we talked about, like how would you respond? How would you respond to that disclosure? So for sure, definitely kind of always use that as a guide, like how do I plan on responding? Thank them for telling you, offer some empathic responses. Will help them feel that they can be supported enough to share and continue on. There's nothing in the chat. Perfect. So what are some referrals that may be helpful? One of those referrals in the case review, and you can drop in the chat What will be some referrals that may be helpful in this process that you can think of? Maybe like a minute. What time? Some referrals that may be helpful would be medical, offering evidence collection if it recently has happened. Possibly, very good. LSU mental health, LSU medical clinic, a referral to wellness and health promotion office. That's great. Those are some great responses. And also like the medical offering pregnancy tests. We can do pregnancy testing in the student health center. We can do emergency contraception, STI screening, STI prophylactic treatment and assessment, emotional support, very good. The LSU mental health. Is the student in crisis? Are they currently in crisis? You can certainly offer them to meet with an on-call clinician within mental health. If they want support and determine, do they want support off campus? Some students may feel more comfortable going off campus. So kind of thinking about what are those resources that are available to them. Academic accommodations, reporting options that they have a report to the police, report to Title IX and student advocacy if they would like to. And then Lighthouse, offering additional guidance and support, where we can do all those additional things such as disability services, providing communication to instructors to let them know, assignments may be late or they may be absent for some reason, or to help them get connected to counseling with priority scheduling with mental health. And what do y'all think that are some challenges that you might encounter when meeting with the student? Y'all can certainly drop in the chat or share what might be some challenges you might face when meeting with them. That might self-blame, great. That is certainly a very normal response that we see very often. They might not trust the process. Very good. If the student were to call into LSU online, every conversation is recorded. Should we tell them up front? We should offer to transfer to LSU Wellness and Health Promotion. Definitely tell them that you can offer to transfer them to the LSU Wellness and Health Promotion. For sure, shame, lack of knowledge that leads to higher anxiety about the process. True. Those are all great responses. And definitely Susan can share more about the other question that they had.
Yeah, I'll step in.
Yeah, Susan will answer one of the questions that we had about that one. But yes, students self-blame, especially if they were drinking in that process. Students' emotional response by meeting. They may be crying. They may be angry. They may be disassociated from the whole process. They may feel numb. Or the students' willingness to share the information, or that you may not have all that information that you'd like. But just saying, okay, I'm going to use whatever information that I have in order to support this student. And is the perpetrator a student? Just remembering at the end of the day, or remembering in this process, remembering your role is to support, guide, educate, and transfer whatever appropriate services that they need. And Susan, do you want to jump in and answer that question? Any other questions that y'all may have about the process, you can certainly drop in the chat and we can support. Seems how much time we have? About 10 minutes. Okay, yeah, we have enough, 10 minutes, enough to answer any questions that y'all may have or anything like that. Are graduate students supported by this program? Yes, they are. Anyone that is a student is supported by this program, and it doesn't matter how long the trauma or the assault had happened, if it happened when they were children versus when they were adults, does not matter. There's really no time frame on when they can receive these services too. It doesn't have to happen while they were at LSU. It could have happened when they were younger as well. This was the one that. Okay. And feel free to ask any questions while we have a few minutes left. But y'all are doing great. Thank y'all.
Natalie. So I do want to go back to your question about being online or LSU online. It would really be beneficial to send the referral over to us if your calls are recorded. And so we're happy to provide that support. Of course, an LSU online student does look a little bit different. So, you know, we'll have to provide support to that student and help them look at resources that may be in their community wherever they're located. Good question, Brittany, about a limit to how much medical expenses are covered. So I don't have a direct answer for that. So, you know, if we're talking about severe injury, we're going to help that student get connected to crime reparations, which will be able to provide that financial support, as well as other resources. So primarily when we're talking about expenses that are covered, we're talking about the screening and the medications. So there is going to be some limit, but we certainly aren't going to leave a student alone to navigate that. We're going to help them find the resources. Again, this is where Natalie really plays a critical role in our collaborative care efforts here within the Lighthouse program. So that is a really good question. Trying to look and see if there's any other questions. I do want to kind of add on to the fact that we do serve all LSU students that are registered on our Baton Rouge campus, as well as LSU online. Something that many of you may not be aware of, our student health center is funded by our student fees. So we do not provide services to faculty and staff. If a student opts out to pay the student health center fee, or in the summer, for example, they may not be registered for classes, but they'll be taking classes in the fall, a student can still access the Lighthouse program, and they will not be charged our semester fee that is billed into their tuition and fees. So that's actually been something in the summer that a lot of students may not be taking their summer courses, but they'll be back in the fall. We certainly provide them the same resources and support. Any other questions? We got, I think, a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna have Jonathan Sanders and Jeff Scott come talk about reporting sexual misconduct, policies, and procedures. They're going to give an overview so that you have a general understanding of what that process looks like. Any other questions? We certainly will take We'll certainly take time to answer questions again, and then kind of review all of these things again this afternoon, doing some more skills training. So next, let's turn it over to Jonathan and Jeff. I'm gonna close my PowerPoint and we'll share screens with you guys. Oh, so good question. So we don't serve faculty and staff in regards to the Lighthouse program. We, you know, many times I've had faculty and staff reach out. We make referrals to community resources. So, Unfortunately, since we are student fee funded, we only can provide these services to LSU students. But STAR is a great resource, as well as RAIN. And we'll post in the chat here just some different community and national resources for those faculty and staff that may need those resources. Good question. All right, so it looks like Jeff and Jonathan are in the meeting. I've made them co-hosts, so if you guys want to take over, I want to thank Jeff Scott. He is our lead investigator for the LSU system, located in the Office of General Counsel, and then Jonathan Sanders, who's Associate Dean of Students and Director of Student Advocacy and Accountability. I want to thank them, and I will let you guys go ahead and take over.
All right, thanks, Susan. As Susan has mentioned, my name is Jeff Scott, and I serve as the Title IX lead investigator here at LSU for the whole system. I want to thank you guys for inviting us to come this morning and share with you. Basically, what I'm going to do is give you an overview of PM 73, which is our policy on sexual misconduct in Title IX, and just go over some changes that have come recently with the new regulations that took effect back on August 14th of 2020. So that's what I'm going to give you some. Basically, our policy, Title IX, covers sex-based discrimination, including sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and things that were covered in the new regulations. It continues to cover gender discrimination. That's just covered very broadly within the regulations. Also, another area where most people don't think that falls under Title IX purview is pregnancy recovery and gender equity, participation and opportunity. All of those also fall under Title IX purview. Some of the regulatory changes that took effect to the Title IX policy, we look at sexual harassment under the new regulations, and the definition has changed somewhat. It's become more streamlined, to say the least, as far as the what is considered sexual harassment. One of the other areas covered under regulations is retaliation. And we can charge individuals for retaliation even if there's no finding on any other charges under Title IX or PM 73. It covers sexual assault, dating, and domestic violence, quid pro quo, which is usually we have that when we have an employee respondent and a student complaint or a victim. The quid pro quo is broadly is this for that. It also covers stalking. And in the definition of sexual harassment, the alleged activity has to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive in order to meet criteria under Title IX investigation. That definition, like I said, has changed somewhat from the previous definition, which was just severe, pervasive, or objectively offensive. Now it's and objectively offensive. So you can see they narrowed the scope of the definition. Some of the other areas that would fall under that are video voyeurism, sexual battery, and also sexual exploitation. One of the other changes that came in the new regulations is the physical jurisdiction limitation. Now, under the new regulations, the physical jurisdiction covers activities that happen on campus in the course of an institutional activity or an event, or using university resources like digitally. If something happened over Zoom or something like that, that's controlled by the university, it covers that. That jurisdiction has changed somewhat. In the previous regulations, we were able to also cover off-campus activity as long as it affected the individuals involved in their educational activities and responsibilities. One of the other new changes in the regulations is supportive measures have to be offered to both parties, both the complainant victim and also the respondent. Previously, they were known as accommodations, but now under the new regulations, they're termed as supportive measures. And as I said, they need to be offered to both parties. As I mentioned before, the sexual harassment definition is more narrowly defined now. And also that the institution's response to any allegation must not be deliberately indifferent. And what that means, if there's a sexual harassment that's happening and we have knowledge of it, we must respond to it. We can't turn a blind eye, and even if we have the knowledge of it, and pretend that it never existed. As I said before, the individuals must be participating or attempting to participate in an educational program or activity. Also, now when a complaint comes in, there has to be a formal complaint to initiate a Title IX investigation. The formal complaint must be written. It can also come in through our online portals, but it must be signed or designated by the victim complainant who is making the complaint. And if the formal complaint is not signed by that person, depending on the severity of the allegations, it can be signed by the Title IX coordinator and moved forward. One of the big differences now with the new policy is a live hearing for those incidents that are not resolved through an informal resolution process. Within a live hearing now, there is the opportunity for cross-examination of all parties involved, and that will be done through an advisor. The advisors are now required to do the cross-examinations in the live hearing process that we go. So the process is a little different than before. Previously, I would do the investigation. I would make a finding if the person was responsible or not responsible. And then it would go from there to either HR or SAA for any type of adjudication. But now through our new process, all of that is done within the hearing process. I, as the investigator, do not make a finding anymore. That is made from the hearing panel, a finding, and any type of punishment is also handled through the hearing panel. As far as interim separation or limitation, if we're going to suspend someone, an interim suspension or something like that, now under the new regulations, an individual risk assessment for physical harm has to be done and endorsed by the Title IX coordinator, where we just can't just summarily suspend somebody because we think the behavior is egregious. Now, under the new regulations, there has to be an individual risk assessment done. And the risk assessment is done, like I said, for physical harm to the parties involved. Supportive measures, as I mentioned before, these were formerly known as accommodations under our old process. And you can make, the person can utilize supportive measures now, regardless of whether they caused harm to the university community member. If you want to use supportive measures, that does not mean a person has to file a formal complaint with the university or even file a criminal complaint with law enforcement. The supportive measures are still available, whether there's a formal complaint or not, or whether there's a formal investigation or not. No, non-disciplinary, non-punitive for the individual requesting. What that means is the supportive measures cannot be of a disciplinary type of measurement to the individual that's requesting them. They have to be reasonable under the circumstances. And as I mentioned before, there has to be equal opportunity for both the complainant and the respondent to be able to take advantage of the supportive measures that are offered. Some of the examples of supportive measures that are offered are mental and physical health services, any type of academic arrangements or judge adjustments, modifications of a work or class schedule, mutual restrictions on contact between parties. What that means is we can have a no contact order issued between two parties involved in a situation. They also include changes in the work, housing or academic location, leaves of absence if necessary, and increased security and monitoring of certain areas of campus if there's a need be for that. This is the Title IX process flow chart that we've come up with, which basically outlines, it's a brief outline of how incidents take place and when they reach the Title IX office. This is found on our website. It's also included in our PM 73 policy. Basically what happens, I'll go through the flow chart briefly, is that if a member of the community experiences conduct, which we consider maybe within PM 73 purview, that conduct is reported to an official with authority, which we term a responsible employee. Those positions of responsible employee have not changed any from the new policy as it was in our previous policy. The individuals that were termed responsible employees has remained the same. Once that happens, the Title IX coordinator will meet with the complainant about the supportive measures, any supportive measures they need, and explain the process. Then we will evaluate the situation and see if it meets jurisdiction that falls under Title IX sexual harassment. If it does fall under Title IX sexual harassment, then a formal complaint is signed by the complainant. If the complainant wishes not to move forward and doesn't want to sign a formal complaint for an investigation, the Title IX coordinator will agree to supportive measures only. And the Title IX coordinator can also review that complaint to see the seriousness of the allegations. If it's something that's happened before, or a person that's familiar to us, then the Title IX coordinator has the option to make the formal complaint themselves. Once that happens, a notice of allegations is sent to the respondent and the respondent's advisor. From there, the Title IX coordinator will meet with the respondent, offer any supportive measures, that's a new part of the process, and explain the process to them. Once that happens, it's then turned over to myself for investigation. I'll go through the investigative process, write a investigative report, and then we'll have a pre-hearing conference, a hearing, and then there's an opportunity to appeal. And that's basically a nutshell of how the process goes once a case is formulated. If the conduct does not meet the definition or jurisdiction of Title IX sexual harassment, say it's sexual misconduct that happens off campus at Tigerland or something like that, then we still investigate it. There will still be an investigation done. It's just a matter of where it will go as far as the adjudication goes. If the respondent is staff or faculty, once the investigation is completed, it'll go through the human resources process. If that person is a student respondent, it'll go to SAA and go through the student conduct process. Anytime during this whole process, an informal resolution can occur from the time of filing a formal complaint up until the time of a hearing, that it goes to a hearing process. So that's basically the way that the new policy is set up, how a case goes through our office and ends up to final adjudication. Some of the continuing practices under the new Title IX policy is the standard of evidence has not changed. We still use a preponderance of evidence, which is more likely than not, which we term as 50 plus a feather. As I had mentioned previously, the responsible employees remain so. And the reason we do that is because anyone can file a report directly through us and not go through the supervisory chain. There are ways to file a report, which I'll mention in a little while. And the main concerns with that is its accuracy, timeliness, and the privacy of all those parties that are involved in an allegation. Parties have the rights to be informed of the outcome of our investigation. And anytime going through the Title IX process, a party has the right to report to law enforcement where criminal activity has occurred. You can report that criminal activity before our process, during our process, or after our process. So sometimes we'll have cases that are going jointly that also law enforcement is working on. Reporting is a personal choice of the harmed individuals. We utilize resources. Doesn't mean, like I said, doesn't mean like an individual has to make a formal complaint. The best way to make a complaint is through the university and through our website at www.lsu.edu/Title IX. We have links once you go to our Title IX page that will direct you to filing a report, whether it's against an employee or against a student. And like I said, with law enforcement, individuals can report before, during, or after our investigation. And if an individual declines to report it to law enforcement and it comes to us and they still don't want an investigation done, they still have access to supportive measures from the university. So anytime a complaint comes in, that's the number one thing we have to do is provide the individuals involved with supportive measures. The Title IX office, our contacts, it consists of Jenny Stewart, who is our Title IX coordinator. She is the coordinator for not only our campus, but for the LSU system as a whole. Myself, I serve as the Title IX lead investigator for the LSU system as a whole. On our campus here, we have Lindsay Medatic, who is the deputy coordinator Deputy Title IX Coordinator for Employee Issues. And we have Brandon Common, our Dean of Students, who is the Title IX Deputy Coordinator for Student-Related Issues. And also we have a Graduate Assistant, Kimberly Davis, who's assigned to our office. And on the bottom is the website, the link to our website for Title IX. That's basically my presentation as far as it goes with PM 73 and Title IX policy changes and updates. Are there any questions before I turn it over to Dr. Sanders? Okay, seeing no questions, I will turn it over to Dr. Sanders.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to grab the screen from you so I can control the slides. Let's see here. Did I do that successfully?
I think so.
You all can see my screen. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? My view just changed, so I don't see my screen anymore on that piece. So just want to make sure that that's still the case. But I have the pleasure and privilege to serve as the Associate Dean and Director of Student Advocacy and Accountability. I too appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak with you all today about student advocacy and accountability and our role regarding sexual misconduct and when cases are not Title IX. So that's kind of where we'll talk about today. Just a little bit about student advocacy and accountability. Our office does address conduct on campus with our students. So that's with behavioral misconduct, academic misconduct, student organization misconduct as well. We work with students, address those issues with undergraduate students, graduate students, distance learning students, LSU online students, veterinary med students. So a wide range of students. If you're basically a dean-based student, then we have purview over you in some capacity. Only exception that would be the law school. They do adjudicate some of their own stuff as well. We also support students from that are in crisis, distress, or concern as part of our LSU Cares and program. We do have an LSU Care team that we also manage as well. Tracy Blanchard works with that team closely. Just any cases we need a staff at a high level to really approach them from an interdisciplinary approach. We're going to bring those to Care team and navigate with other stakeholders at the table to really address those concerns and how to best support students who may be in crisis, distress, or concern. I share that with you today, just knowing that those are resources as well as supportive measures that Jeffrey Scott spoke about previously that we need to offer students. Certainly from a CARES perspective, we can do that as well. And you all being a supportive measure from Lighthouse, being a part of this program is another supportive measure for students as well. Just looking at just the Code of Student Conduct and talking about, Jeff kind of talked about how the scope of Title IX really narrowed as a result of the recent changes to Title IX federally and what we had to change here at LSU as well. The good news is where it narrowed, we still have the opportunity to address those concerns because from the Code of Student Conduct, we can address concerns that are on or off campus. It doesn't matter. We can address those concerns. So as Jeff mentioned, that if the behavior occurs off campus, then that means that it's not perhaps Title IX. But even though it's not Title IX, there's still concerning behaviors there, and we can still address it from a Code of Student Conduct perspective. The Code of Student Conduct is currently under revision, just to share this with you all. We had a committee of faculty, staff, and students who met in the fall semester, revised the code, wanted to make sure that we filled any gaps or holes by the changes in PM 73 in our Title IX process. Those changes are currently under review under General Counsel's office, so we're hoping that those changes will go into effect soon. The good news is that our current code was so broad and general and based beforehand that we really truly can address pretty much anything that comes across information that's shared with us. If it doesn't fit within Title IX, 99.9% sure that we can address it from a Code of Student Conduct perspective as well. But again, we are improving the code to make sure that we're filling any gaps and measures there to support our students on campus and the safety of our students. This also includes revisions to the code to see how we can also improve our response to bias and discrimination concerns as well. That was the kind of two purviews we used this past fall, working with the committee to update the code and make sure that, again, we improve the code from a conduct perspective. Jurisdiction, again, is on or off campus, so it doesn't regardless of whether it's on or off campus, we can still address that behavior. Certainly if the behavior occurred on campus and meets the other thresholds that Jeffrey Scott just mentioned, those behaviors will be addressed through Title IX. But if it doesn't meet that threshold, even if it's on campus, we still can address that as well. So again, for the Code of Student Conduct, we can address it on or off campus behaviors. Violation of law can also be a violation of the code as well, as Jeffrey Scott mentioned. Same with the Code of Student Conduct. It doesn't matter if someone's going through a criminal process or not. We can still address it with the code. Sometimes that criminal process is ongoing while we're still addressing it with the code. Sometimes we have wrapped up the case and it's got a nice bow on it and we're finished. Sometimes before the legal process even plays out. So we know that oftentimes those can take years, unfortunately, to adjudicate in the criminal process. For us, it's a much shorter time frame. We can usually wrap those up in weeks to perhaps months for even the most elaborate concerning cases for us. Proposed edits include maintaining equal rights in the process for all parties for sexual misconduct and adding hazing as well. So that's something we want to make sure was very important. So we want to, in our prior code, we also extended rights to complainants as well in our process. We made sure we strengthen those rights in our new code revisions, so hopefully will be implemented soon to allow both the complainant and the respondent to have equal rights in the process. So I think that's something important for you to know, especially as you're supporting a student who's going through the process, is letting them know that they do have equal rights in the process. So if one of the party has the opportunity to an appeal or to request a hearing panel, then the complainant also has that opportunity as well. So making sure, again, we have equal rights in the process for both parties involved in this piece. We also define complainant as someone that's bringing forth the concerns and that those concerns happen to them. So they don't actually have to be a student. So let's say that a student is married to someone that's not a student, and perhaps they're had a rough patch there and getting divorced, and there's some violence that occurred there with the relationship. That reporting party who's not a student could report that information to us, and we can address those concerns with the student. Again, the reporting party doesn't have to be a student to have those full rights in our process as well. So I think that's also something unique to note in our process. This here is kind of a flow chart, if you will. Let's kind of talk through a little bit just about the Code of Student Conduct process. This process will be the same whether it's an academic case, whether it's a behavioral misconduct case, a hazing case, or sexual misconduct, sexual harassment case. This is all following the same process, and I'll talk through each one of these boxes with you. The first box there says reporter identifies potential violations, submits a report via lsu.edu/LSU cares. That is our reporting page. That reporting page also reports students of concern, bias discrimination complaints, hazing complaints, student organization complaints, and PM 73 Title IX complaints, all go through the LSU Cares reporting page for students. So again, want to make you aware of that website. When we receive that report, those reports come to me. Unless it's deemed Title IX, then they'll go to Jenny Stewart first, and she'll review those. But if it's not Title IX, then those reports will come to me. And what I do is I review those reports, see what additional information we might need, perhaps follow up with the person who submitted the report, look at the applicable charges on the Code of Student Conduct, what might be appropriate from the code, and then I'll assign those to a hearing officer for our office. The hearing officer will also review those cases as well. We have a kind of checks and balances, again, to make sure I didn't miss anything, especially relates to potential charges under the code. Hearing officer will review the information, and then we'll schedule a meeting with the student. So it's usually we're going to meet with in a case that's involving sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. Oftentimes we're going to meet with the complainant first, again, to make sure we have all the information they want to share with us, to make sure we have a full scope of all the concerns. And then we'll typically meet with the charged student, the alleged student in our process. So we'll send them a charge letter, and they will then come in and meet with our hearing officers that's assigned to that case. That opportunity, that hearing officer meeting is an opportunity for that person to share, again, their information about the case, know the charges against them, know their rights in our process. We might want to make sure we explain those to them as well, and also what the process looks like moving forward. But that's their opportunity to provide a statement to us. In our process, students don't have to share information, though. That is a right. They don't have to incriminate, quote unquote, themselves. But certainly if we're bringing forth information about them and they don't share information, then it's probably going to be pretty easy to reach preponderance, right? Because we have another party sharing information that things did occur, and no one else is sharing that it didn't occur. So again, preponderance is probably reached pretty easily in that point in those cases if students choose not to share those things. Not all the time, but certainly could be the case as well. Once we have all the information we think we need, if there's other perhaps witnesses we might need to meet or material observers, we also meet those folks as well. Once we feel like we have all the information to move forward, we will then issue an outcome to that student and the charged student. So that outcome could be not responsible, and it could also be responsible. If found responsible, we will issue then what we call a status for the student. That status in our process ranges anything from a warning to expulsion. I tell folks that we very rarely assign warnings in our process. We also very rarely assign expulsion. A majority of our outcomes fall somewhere in the middle there. We do assign those to some degree, but again, majority of our cases fall somewhere in the middle of those pieces. If we're looking at sexual violence, sexual misconduct, we know that particularly those outcomes are typically fall on the upper end of that spectrum. We're looking at those outcomes. I'm not going to go through each of those outcomes, or those could be, but those are listed in our Code of Student Conduct. So if you want to see more about those, they're actually in Section 11 of the Code of Student Conduct. So if you want to visit that on our website, those can be found in Section 11. But that's, again, I talked about equal rights in the process, right? So when we issue the outcome to the charged student, the alleged student, the respondent in this case, in cases where there's been sexual violence or sexual misconduct, we also let the complainant know of what the outcome is as well. And they have then 3 days to either choose to accept or not accept that outcome. And if they choose not to accept it, either party, they will just fill out a hearing panel request form is what it's called. The link to that is in the letter we would send to them. They would simply fill out the form, and that's notification to us that they would like to have the case reheard by a university hearing panel. It is a rehearing of the case. This is not an appeal. I think students get confused on that sometimes, or sometimes advisors as well, but it is a rehearing of the case. So anytime that either party does not agree with the outcome for whatever reason, then that case will be referred to a university hearing panel. And that's the next step in our process. For us, a university hearing panel consists of a minimum 3, maximum 5 folks. A hearing panel has to have at least a faculty member and a student to make quorum. So for us, a student, a peer, and a faculty member have to be a part of that panel. And the other person could be a student, faculty, or staff member. We have about 60 folks who are trained in our panelist pool, and we simply schedule those folks based on availability and also based on skills as well. We do specific trainings related to sexual misconduct and sexual harassment that those panelists have gone through, and when cases involve those types of things, we'll make sure we pull panelists that have that training in order to participate in that process. This is a rehearing the case. I will be present with that in that panel as well. I'll present what information I discover or learned about the case. The respondent would be there to share information they have about the case. The complainant would also be there to share information they have about the case. They'd also have the opportunity to question each other and question any material observers that are also requested to be at the hearing panel. After the hearing panel has a chance to review all the information, they'll issue then an outcome for the student. That outcome could be not responsible or responsible. If found responsible, that outcome could be less punitive than the outcome we gave. It could be the same outcome that we gave, or it could be more punitive. It really just depends on what those 3 to 5 folks think and based on the information presented during that hearing panel. So again, it's an option to have a rehearing of the case, and both the complainant and respondent both have that right. There is an appeal process then at the very end, and Dr. Brandon Common, our Dean of Students, would hear those appeals, and both parties have the opportunity to an appeal. So again, complainant and respondent both have the opportunity to appeal. They have to be submitted within 5 business days of the outcome being sent from the hearing panel. And there's 3 reasons basically why someone can appeal through our process. First and foremost, if new information became available after the hearing panel. So let's say the day after the hearing panel, let's say a video surfaces, and we didn't know about this video. No one knew about it, but someone shared it with someone, and that person thinks that it would have impacted the decision of the panel. They can appeal based on that criteria to the Dean of Students, to Dr. Common. Second, if we didn't extend all rights to the students. So if we didn't give due process and fundamental fairness, which is the anchors and the tenets of our accountability for not only LSU, but just higher education in general, we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to appeal on that piece as well. Those rights are outlined in our Code of Student Conduct. And for the third option to an appeal is bias. If they believe the hearing panel was biased towards them in some kind of way, they can also appeal on that factor as well. So there's kind of 3 specific prongs that appeal must meet in order to be reviewed by the Dean of Students through that process, but knowing that both parties have that right as well to do an appeal to the Dean of Students. So the respondent, if you're working, or the complainant, if you're working with them, they also have the right to do that as well. Again, complainant, whether they're a student or not, again, they both have equal rights in the process, based on our code and how complainant is described. The last piece is the LSU Cares piece. I talked about that being a supportive measure, and again, just an extension or a supportive measure from a Lighthouse perspective as well. Certainly, we work very closely with Susan. Anytime that we receive a case that comes to our attention, we call it ping in our system Susan to let her know about that, so that Lighthouse can outreach to those students. We want to make sure that we provide supportive measures for them. As Jeffrey Scott mentioned too, the supportive measures aren't just for the complainant; they're also for the respondent as well. If they, since they're a student too, we want to make sure that we also support them too. So, oftentimes our teams, when there's multiple students involved in a case, we'll divide and conquer and divide those students up amongst different team members. So again, there's no overlap in that piece, and feel like there's any conflict of interest in that piece. But want to make sure that we understand that opportunity as well. I mentioned LSU Cares previously, again, through that reporting page. That's where behavioral and active misconduct can be reported, sexual misconduct and hazing, bias or discrimination complaints, complaints and grievances. Our office also manages those. Concerns about students in crisis or distress, and also pregnancy needs too. That's something the last 2 years we really tried to beef up support is for pregnancy needs. So if you know any students who are pregnant or just had a child, and would perhaps benefit from support, please report those folks through LSU Cares as well. We have a team of folks working specifically with our pregnant needs on campus. So a great resource there for you. And that kind of wraps up the official presentation, I think, for Jeffrey Scott and I. I think he's still part of the presentation, but certainly want to open up for any additional questions that you all might have based on us describing the Title IX process and the Code of Student Conduct process. I want to answer any questions that you all might have at this time. So if you want to drop those in the chat or let us know verbally, we can answer those.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. Can you expand on maybe the reasoning behind a 5 business day time frame for the appeal?
Yeah, so that's just to make sure that we're being expeditious in our process. Oftentimes students complain about how long things may drag out in our process. So it's to keep timeframes in place for that appeal piece. The only caveat to that, if new information comes available, certainly that may not be within that 5-day time frame. We will review appeals that occur outside of 5 days if it's new information, right? Because that might be a month from now, it might be 2 months from now. We may not have known that information directly after the panel piece. But that is one caveat to that piece is for the 5 days is if new information became available, that might be a month from now, right? Or 2 months from now. We might not know that's within 5 days of a hearing panel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions, thoughts, concerns?
In your chart, the reporter, can they track the case or just after reporting is over?
You said track their case. Can they retract their case?
Yes.
Yeah. So when we're going through our process, again, like I said, we will typically meet with the complainant first, again, just to make sure we have the full story. Certainly, we know we're not trying to re-victimize them by telling their story again. They may have already told it to someone. If there's reports out there, we're certainly going to read those beforehand, before meeting with the student to talk about that information. But we'll stay in contact with that person. I think that's where you, as a Lighthouse representative, and Susan's really good about this too. If there is updates, if people want to know timeline updates, those kinds of things, I know Susan's been very good about with us saying, hey, the complainant's reached out. She's just curious to know timeline, that sort of thing. She may not feel comfortable, or that they might feel comfortable reaching out to us and asking that question. So that's something as a Lighthouse representative, and Susan for sure, we want to make sure that we let them know where we are in our process and let them know the timeline. Certainly that timeline could take a detour. I might tell them I hope to have this wrapped up in the next couple of weeks, but then I meet with the charge student and they say, oh, these 6 people are also witnesses to this, and I think you should talk to them. So we never know what information might be shared by someone and how many more folks we might need to meet with or speak with. But certainly we can usually give general timelines when we hope to have things wrapped up and when they should expect to receive further communication from us. And sometimes that response is, I'm still working on it. I don't know just yet. Let me get back to you by Friday. I'll let you know. I'll have a better sense of where we are in the case and how long it'll take after I meet with, this one next person or whatever. But Susan's really good about working with us on those things and making sure we share that information with all parties. So that's not only just for the complainant, but also for the respondent too in this piece.
And Jonathan, I'll just add on that every Thursday we have a case management meeting. We have a team of individuals that meet and go through all of our cases, and Susan sits on that team also. So we keep an update. We have someone from the CARES team, Residential Life, Susan, LSU PD, from Jonathan's office, and we all are able to get updates on what's happening on individual cases. So that is another means if you needed an update as a Lighthouse rep. Susan is always there and we communicate back and forth.
Susan, any questions you think you get common about either processes just from working with Lighthouse advocates in the past that maybe we didn't cover or didn't share?
No, I think you guys did an excellent job. This process, as they talked about, has changed. So I'm still learning it. I know those flowcharts are really helpful for me. I always have one of those handy. Like I mentioned in the chat, we will make sure that that's included in your manual. But having that out and providing that to the student is really helpful. You certainly are not expected to know every in and out of this process. I am in the mix every day, so I'm very familiar with it. Again, reach out to me. Another thing that I'm not sure was mentioned, or I do want to reiterate, as an advocate, that student may make the decision to go through and report to LSU, and you can be their support person. So helping or just attending meetings with them, to be there for emotional support, not necessarily providing them, help with what exactly they should be asking as they maybe meet with Jonathan or Jeff, but just being there as an emotional support.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, I think, a really helpful thing as an advocate, as Jonathan said, is just providing those students updates. As they talked about the different processes and having equal rights and the ability to appeal at certain portions in the process, just kind of helping a student keep track of that. I know it's a lot, 5 business days here and then 10 business days for this. So just being that person that can help them just remember what the next steps is, that's very helpful to students. So thank you for joining us. And if anyone does have any questions, we still have a few minutes.
I did receive one question about how can some folks be involved in hearing panels. So if you want to be a university hearing panelist and would like to, obviously you couldn't serve in both capacities if you're working with a case with a student, but we do recruitment of university hearing panelists usually every summer. But if you want to send me an email saying, hey, I have interest in being a university hearing panelist, I'll share that with Dan DeLuca from our staff, who's in charge of recruitment. So for students, faculty, and staff, or if you know people who might be good panelists for us, we're usually pretty good on staff. It's usually faculty and students that we, not say struggle with, but usually have less interest, or we have to go out and kind of drum up interest from folks and kind of recruit people to help serve in that capacity. So if you know of any folks who are interested in that, again, we have behavioral misconduct, academic misconduct, student organization misconduct. We deal with a wide range of things. So certainly want to let you know that opportunity exists too. If you would like to get involved in that, we're always looking forward for folks to help support us in that way. And one of the things I was going to share too, I think Susan, what did you mentioned? Hey, I've just lost my train of thought. Hold on for a second. I had one more thing in my brain to say. I don't know. It'll come back to me, hopefully. I'll think of it.
Happens to the best of us.
Oh, I was the advisor. That's what it was. So you mentioned the supportive person in the meeting. So every party who meets with us gets to have an advisor present. So again, I think Susan was just saying that you all can serve as that advisor for the student. That person can't speak on the student's behalf, but they can speak with that student, and they can either for emotional support, they can provide comfort. We can leave the room and they can talk privately, and then we can come back in the room. We'll do that several times during meetings, perhaps, especially if it's a tough meeting for a student to really share information or know what to share, that sort of thing. So really want to help navigate those things. We also, different from, I didn't mention this, from Jeff Scott's process, we don't have to have a quote unquote live hearing. So we have to have a hearing, right? So we definitely want to work with a student to see how they like to participate in that hearing. If they want to be via phone, or if they want to have their camera off on Zoom, but participate just via voice, they can actually choose not to participate. We've had students say, I want this to go to a hearing panel, but I don't want to participate, but here's my impact statement that I want to be considered by the panel. And we will work with that student. So we'll work with Susan, we'll work with you as the Lighthouse advocate and work with the student to figure out, if we do have a hearing panel, what's the best way that they feel comfortable participating in that process. So we've done everything from those folks actually being in our office before we were doing Zoom, Skyping into the meeting virtually. Certainly now that we're in Zoom, we're actually doing all of our hearing panels in Zoom. So it's kind of easier, more accessible for folks to be in a different space and be in a space with a comfort person or an advisor or whatever. So again, if we get to that point, I think that's where we'll talk about, what are folks comfortable being in that space, because we don't have to have that live hearing per se, and having that questioning piece where it does have to happen in Title IX. We're more flexible in that, and from a student action accountability perspective and the code perspective.
Thank you. I don't know, Jeff, if you had any final words to wrap up.
No, I just want to say, as far as Jonathan was mentioned with the hearing, the Title IX does say about the live hearing process, but we also use Zoom in that process now. So it can be through Zoom, not necessarily everybody in the same room. And individuals, as I mentioned, in our hearing process, the advisors do the questioning. And we don't expect you as a Lighthouse advocate, as an advisor, to do questioning when we have a cross-examination process in our hearing process. And we have individuals lined up for that. So if you're representing someone and it comes to a Title IX hearing and there's a live hearing and cross-examination, and they say, hey, I need somebody to do that. We are in the process of proctoring individuals that will serve in that role in our hearing process. It's more like an attorney kind of role to ask questions. So you, as a Lighthouse advocate, as an advisor, would not be put in that role to cross-examine individuals in our process.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you talking about that. I know that when we were talking about the new guidelines coming down in August, I was nervous myself that I was going to have to take on some attorney role, but yes, we have trained individuals that will do that cross-examination. So thank you again. Please, if you have questions following up with this, you can contact Jeff and Jonathan directly. I will share everyone's contact information as well as following up with me. So thank you again. So at this time, we're on our lunch break, so please log back on. Be ready to go at 1. We'll be back with some more case discussion, and then this afternoon we're bringing in our community partner sexual trauma awareness response for neurobiology of trauma. So enjoy your lunch, take a break from the screen, and we'll see you back in the hour.